Welcome back to another legit coding exercise. Here we're going to review the for loop and loops in general. So to review the for loop, we're going to start with Eclipse. Here I have Eclipse open. You see my Eclipse workbench. And I'm going to open up a brand new Java object. Where did I put that? Here it is, blank Java. So I'm going to grab blank Java over and move it into my demos directory. Where's my demos? Here's demo 2. I'm going to stick it in the source, and that will make me a blank Java in the source, and I can change the name. So I grab my blank Java. It's just a text file with nothing in it. The name, the extension is .java. This is runnable. So I'm going to copy the file over. This copies a blank Java file into the demos 2 package or project. And where did it go? Here it is, blank Java. So we're going to rename this before we start. We're going to rename this ForDemo. So to name it, we need to do a, what's it called? Refactor. And refactor changes something that's in a program. In this case, we're going to change the name of the file. We're going to rename the file. We're going to call this file, instead of blank, we'll call it ForDemo. This should open the file. You can double click on the ForDemo. That opens the file in the text editor, and we can begin a Java demo. So I always like to begin by doing comments. And so here this is, I'm going to name the file ForDemo. And the purpose of this file is to demonstrate the use of the for loop. And there are two kinds of for loops. So I'm going to ask the student who is, hey, return, there we go. The two kinds of for loops are the standard for loop and the for each loop. And we can go through both of them. Do you know both?
I know the first one.
You know the for loop. Okay, for each loop. So for this demo, we're going to need a class to run things in. And so we're going to make a new class. It's a public class. And we have to name it the same name as the file name, which is called ForDemo. And in public class ForDemo, we're going to demonstrate the for loops. So I'm going to use a main for the for loops. So public. A main is a void, so the return type is void. The name of the function is main, the method. Main has one parameter, that is a string array. And I can call mine args. You can call it anything you want to, as long as a single string array comes in as a parameter. Now, class, the scope for the class scope is denoted by the open and closed curly braces right after the class declaration. And the scope for the main method is by the open and closed curly braces right after the main declaration. So all the statements that we place between those curly braces are in the specific scope. So here I'm going to put my for loop inside the main scope. And let's have something for this for loop to do. Let's print out the numbers 1 through 10. So this is something easy for a for loop to do. And you use a for loop to do this. So we have two parts. We have a counting part, or a step part. And then the second part is the print part, which is inside the loop.
Is this for a for or for each one?
Any. So let's do the for loop first. We'll do the for loop here. So all loops have two parts. There's a control part. For the for loop, we're going to do the control part initializes a variable, checks to see if the loop part is executed, the conditional part, and then the last part is the increment part. So for a for loop, there are three parts for the control part. For the for loop, we have an initialization. We have a conditional, and we have an increment part. And each of those are a statement that occurs once when the for loop starts. We test every time to see if we run the loop, and we increment after the loop. So we have a control part, and then we have the inside the loop, or the loop part. And in our loop part, we're just going to print something. So the order of access, the order of execution for a for loop is 1, you do the initialization once at the very beginning. 2, you test the conditional. And if it is true, then we do the loop part, loop statements. If it is true, do the loop, else exit the for. The fourth step is to do the increment. So with this basic definition of the order of execution, what is the minimum number of times we can do the loop part? Do we have to do it once?
If the condition is
We do the initialization once and always once. We test the conditional at least once. If it's false, what happens? Exits. Do we do the loop if it exits?
no.
No. So what's the minimum number of times we can do the loop? 0. We don't have to do it.
That sounds like a weird.
Wait, what? Doesn't it have to?
No. We want it to, right? The loop's there because we want it to do it, but it doesn't have to. It's going to test the conditional in step number 2. And if the conditional is true, then it does the loop. If the conditional is false, it does not do the loop, but it exits the for. For instance, let's do a for loop. For int I equals 1, I is greater than is less than 0, I plus plus, print. Sorry, let's do system out print. Dot print line I. How many prints of I am I going to get with this for loop? How many times am I going to print I? 0 times. That's correct. So we do not have to do the statements. Let's put my statements in a statement block. We don't have to do that. If I want to print the numbers 1 through 10, what do I do the conditional? 11. So now if we run this, whoopsie, if we run the for demo, I need to run the for demo. What is wrong with this thing? Why is it not working? Public class for demo for. Static. Ah, that's why it's not running. This has to be static. All right, now it has something to run. Let's see if we can get that thing to run. There it goes. All right, 1 through 10. All right, so let's look at this for loop again, one last time. The for loop has 3 parts. The syntax is for, the keyword for, an open parenthesis. We have 3 parts that are semicolon delimited. The first part is initialization. In this initialization, I create a variable by declaring it I, and I assign its initial value to 1. So initialization ideally initializes or sets initial value, or the start state, usually of the control variable that controls when to execute the loop and when to stop executing the loop. The second part is a conditional. The conditional controls whether the loop executes or not. In my example here, that control is I is less than 11, and the loop will happen or fire if I is less than 11. The loop will not occur if I is 11 or greater. I starts at 1. 1 is indeed less than 11, so it will print when I is 1. The third part of the for syntax is the increment part. In the increment here, I do I++. Generally, the increment part adjusts the control variable. So here, I'm going to call I my control variable, and I is the control variable, and I'm using I to control when to do the print and when to stop. Now, in the AP exam, you'll be given for loops. You'll be asked to choose the multiple choice question what the output is. The for loops will do weird things with the control variables. So you'll have to watch the control variables, and the easy way is to use whiteboard debugging. On the AP, use whiteboard debugging to follow complex for loops. Okay, so that's the for loop in specific. Is that enough for you, Nevada? Or is there something missing?
Should be enough.
Yes. Yes. Anyone else? For loop.
Forget to do the for each loop.
Does anyone want some more for the for loop? Okay, for each. Can someone tell me how the for each loop works? What is the syntax of the for each loop? Do you remember?
You got the for, and then inside the for you got the each.
And how do I do each?
You put each,
You put
curly brace,
variable
and then you put inside.
the name of the array.
Oh, yeah, sort of. So we need some kind of array or something to play with. So let's make ourselves a, what do you call it, an array list of integers. And we'll call this int array. Int array list. And we're going to start this as a new array list of integers, and it will be empty. And then to this array list, we're going to add crap. So let's just do some for loop. Int I equals 0, I is less than 10, I plus plus. And all we're going to do here is to our int array list dot add, I think it's add, right? Add. And we'll just do a random. So math dot random times 100. There we go. So if I've done everything correct, I'm going to add a
Could you explain random?
yes. Okay, random. So we put random in my list. Oh, I'll do that later. I'll put it on my list here. So what I want to do here is to prepare for the for each loop. The for each loop needs a container. And here we're going to use array list. Let's make this just list. Let's add it in. Let's see. Dimensions to complete reference type. List int array list equals new array list int. And it's mad at me. Why is it mad at me? Maybe integer. Doesn't know what array list is. Import array list, and doesn't know what list is. Import list. Ah, fixed. All right, so in here, we're going to add an integer, new integer, math random, and I think I have everything now. Let's see. Nope, it's mad. Why is it mad? Doesn't know doubles. Oh, okay. Int. All right, so I had to do a lot of fixes here to get things working. I don't know if you watched me, but when something was broken, there'd be a little red line under it. I'd look at the red line. It tells me what's wrong. The list looks like it wants objects. Let's see if we can get actual ints in here. Nope, it's bad at ints. And it says insert dimensions to complete reference type. I have no idea what. So we want the integer, and that changes it from a basic or a simple data type to a complex or a class data type. So integers are wrappers around ints, and integer has some functions associated with it. It's a class. Here I have an array list of integers, and now we can do the for each loop. So if this works, someone asked about how does math random work. Let's look at math random. So math.random is going to return a random double number between 0 inclusive and 1 exclusive. In other words, get a random percent between 0% and 99.99999 and so on percent. So random's going to give you a percentage between 0 and 100. So it's going to give you how much of something to give you. In this case, I'm multiplying that 0 to 100 by 100, so I should get the numbers 0 to 99.9999. When I int that, I get the numbers 0 to 99. So now I have a single integer into which to stick my integer, and I make a new integer to put into my array list. The for loop will put 10 of these numbers between 0 and 100, or 99, into the array list. Let's make that 0 and 100 by adding 1 to this math random after I int it. That's the integer. Here we go. And then let's print the array list out. Let's see if we can print it. System.out.print line. And what's this thing called? Int array list. This may not work, but let's try it. It did work. I don't know if you can see it. It's hiding behind my screen. Let's move that. To show the for each loop, I need a container. I'm using a list as a container. To add to a list, to put a new element in the list, use the add function off the list. This container contains integers. To make a new integer, I use the new command in integer. So here we see a preview of instantiation of classes. All I needed to do is show the for each loop. To see if this worked and I actually have a container to work off of, I use system.out.println int array list. So now let's do the for loop. The for each loop. For each syntax. Use the keyword for, and we have the individual element or element variable in the container. And then we have the loop. So let's make this. We see for the individual elements inside my container are integers. Integer, we'll call it capital I. In the container's name is int array list. This will get the capital I out. And what do we want to do with it? Let's just print it. System.out.println I. So similar to the for loop above, in the for loop I counted between 1 and 10 and printed to 1 and 10. Now I've created a random number between 1 and 100. I've created 10 of them. I print the array list. Then I want to go use a for each loop. The for each loop has 3 parts. We have the define the element. So we're declaring a variable that is each element in the array list. This array list has integers in it. So the variable is an integer type, and I called it I. I can call it anything.
Is that a semicolon?
It is a colon here. Let's make this bigger so you can see it. It's a colon here. So we have a part 1, which is the variable declaration, element variable declaration. Then we have the colon in the middle, colon, and we have the name of the container at the end, container. Then we have the open curly brace, and we have the loop statements. Here I have one single loop statement in the open curly braces. If this works, I should print the contents of my array list. Yes?
What if you want to print random numbers like double and starting at 0?
I'm sorry, what?
What if you're trying to print out random numbers but you want to start from a random number as part of 0?
Oh, okay. So here I added 1. So math random here gives me 0 to 1. I multiply that by 100, but it's a double. And I get 0 to 99.99999. I int that, that throws away the fraction. So now I have 0 to 99, the integers. I then add 1 to it, and that gives me from 1 to 100. So I go 0 to 99 plus 1 gives me 1 to 100. So we have an offset. We have a range. Actually, this is a domain. And that gives you the range of your random numbers.
What's the reason you say integer instead of just int?
Because int wasn't working. So if I change the list to int, I'm getting an error that I can't figure out. So the error, we got this red error here, and it says syntax error, insert dimensions to complete reference type. I have no idea what that means. Plus F2 for focus. And so I don't want to spend time trying to figure out how to make it an int. So I used instead an integer, and that worked.
Okay.
Now I suppose we can make int arrays. So let's try a for each loop with an int array. So I do an int array. Int array, I don't know what we call it. Int array simple equals, and we can do a list here. So we do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You might see these. These are called initialization lists for the int arrays. And then maybe we can do a for each loop on this. So then the for each loop for this would be a for, am I in the right place? No, it should be here. For each integer I in int array simple. See if this works for me. I'm going to try to print it. How come I am, my curly braces are screwed up. So let's see, curly brace, curly brace, curly brace, curly brace, curly brace, curly brace, two extra, one here. Oh, one's missing. All right, I think all my curly braces are in the right place. I think we're good here. System.out.print line I. That worked. So let's walk through the two examples of the for each loop. Again, a for each loop needs a container on which to pull elements out of. We need to declare a variable to hold each element in as we pull it out of the container. And then we need a loop statement to execute. For the first one, I have an array list called int array list. The int array list contains integers in it. We see that up here where we create the int array list. So I need to declare a variable for each integer that I'm going to pull out of the int array list. And that is the type that I have inside, which is the integer. And I name that variable something. I'm calling that variable I. So I get each I out of the int array list, and I'm going to use the loop statements, print it. If the int array list is empty, the loop will not fire. If the int array list has stuff in, then each one will be fired through the loop. We can do the same thing with a simple array. Here's an int array. To create an int array, we use int in the square brackets to say it's an array. We name the variable. This is a reference variable, which we'll talk about. We assign it using an initialization list here. Values to store inside the int array. Let me move this over a little bit. No, that's fine. So here I'm creating an int array, a simple int array, called int array simple. And then I use the for loop for that. Inside the int array simple are integers. Each one is going to be stored in the variable I, which I declare to be an integer type variable. And the name of this int array, the name of the collection is int array simple. So this is the for each loop. Again, we have declare a variable to hold each element in the colon, the container, do the loop. So those are for loops in a nutshell. So for practice, how much time do we have left? We have about 5-10 minutes. If you wish, this is completely voluntary. I would like you to make a for loop to count from 1 to 100, and then make a for loop to recite the alphabet backwards. So can you do that for me? So I need a for loop to count from 1 to 100, and a for loop to recite the alphabet backwards. All right, do it. Anyone have no idea where to begin? I can come and help you. Turn off the what? Oh, yeah, I'm done. You're right. Thank you.
Edit that out.
Yeah, I can do.